Hi, I'm Dave Wurzel, and you're watching PHTV4 Spotlight Issues, exploring today's topics. And specifically on this show, we're going to be talking about high school sports during the restrictions put in place caused by the COVID pandemic. The IHSA, the Illinois High School Association, is allowing some sports to go ahead, some with modified scheduling, others have been postponed to the spring. Today, to help us through this topic is Mark Vanderkooi. He is the athletic director at Lincoln Way East High School, but he's also got roots in Palos Heights.
I do,
Mark,
yeah.
you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Palos Heights is a very special place to me. I went to high school here, met my wife in high school here, had 2 children born at Palos Hospital, spent 10 years living here, and actually worked at Chicago Christian for 6 years as the athletic director and football coach. Worked with you there.
Yes, you did.
Some great memories, memories of our times there. So Palos Heights is a special place to the Vanderkooi family.
Good. Well, I'm glad you made the trip out here for us. I have tremendous respect for you. You know that those 3 years that I coached with you at Chicago Christian were, wonderful. They were treasured for me. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
Before we take a look at what it's like right now in the high school, let's go back to March. I was coaching at Sandburg High School, track and field at the time, so I remember that. I'd like to get your reactions to March when the schools are closed and we went to remote learning and sports were canceled, even though I think at the time we thought we'd be coming back. What was that like for you?
Well, surreal, really, to be honest with you. We were at a party the Friday before we got closed down, and someone asked me, do you think Lincoln Way is going to close down? I said, Lincoln Way doesn't close down for anything. We go through snow days, hail, storms, tornadoes, whatever it is. Lincoln Way is always in school. So my first initial reaction was, we're not going to close down for the coronavirus. Well, then of course we closed down. I thought, okay, maybe a day, maybe a week, and then, we'll get through spring break at the end of the month. And then all of a sudden it creeped into April. And it's like, wow, this is real. And then you start thinking about the end of the school year. We're getting close. You think about your seniors and all that. Once we got into May, I kind of realized we weren't going to start back up. And so that's when it was always real, but that's when it really realized that it was going to affect student athletes, coaches, students, all that thing.
Yeah, I remember, I think we had the same exact experience at Sandburg High School. We thought we'd be coming back, thought we were, and it was difficult. Like you're saying, the kids who lost out on the opportunity to compete. I know we had kids who were talking about, they want to compete at a high level. They want to compete downstate.
Sure, sure.
All right, so then how about you survive the spring and then you get into the summer? And I don't know that everybody's aware how busy the summer actually is in high school sports. So can you talk about what were some of the issues that came up in the summer? How did you approach heading into the next school year, knowing that things may or may not happen, or the uncertainties, summer camps, scheduling, all those types of things?
Yeah. Just like really everything in the pandemic, there was just a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of I don't know. And in a job like mine where I control a lot of the variables, that was tough because people were coming to me, coaches, parents, student athletes were coming to me, and there was just a lot of I don't knows. We kept working as if we were going to be phase 5 in the fall and ready to roll again. And so we put in the work like we were going to move forward. However, in the summer we have summer camps. Well, we went from early where they said there was going to be 0 contact with student athletes in the summer to then they allowed some contact days, some summer camps with a lot of guidelines and rules in place that we had to teach our coaches of how to enforce and whatnot. And so there was just a lot of work adjusting to new rules. It was new for everybody. And not only did I have to learn the rules and be able to interpret them, I had to teach our coaches how to enforce them and whatnot with the student athletes. So yeah, there was just a lot of work. But as far as coming into the fall, we had to work as if everything was normal and hoping it was.
Yeah, it's going to be really tough because you gear up your energy, you train a certain way to be ready at a certain point, and yet there's the uncertainty as to, will this thing really go or not, but planning as if it would. How do you think how did the coaches and athletes react to that kind of, the uncertainty we're talking about, but planning for,
That was hard. It was hard because most student athletes and coaches are goal setters and go-getters, and they want to move forward. they're creatures of habit, so they know what the routine is. Well, the routine got blown up, and so they had to adjust. So I think it was tough for them. Everyone kept hope alive, right? I mean, and that was the thing I kept on trying to enforce to our student athletes and coaches is we're hoping for this to resolve and us to get to phase 5. But also on the flip side is we had to take care of their health and make sure that they were safe and that we were following the guidelines that would keep everyone healthy. Like the pandemic, we didn't really know how big this was going to get.
Right.
And so, you had to balance with keeping hope alive with also making sure that we were being safe and keeping the health of our student athletes and coaches first and foremost.
Right. To me, that just seems an incredible task. I mean, an incredible challenge to kind of face. So you deal with that, you get through the summer, then the school year starts, and even at the beginning of the school year, there was a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not there'd be a season or not. I felt like I was hearing those things even as late as in August, which all fall sports are, at that point, full go, I think, by mid-August, right?
Right.
So what is happening this fall then? How did that play out? What does it look like in high school right now, high school athletics?
Fortunately, actually, it's really busy. I mean, basically every sport's doing something right now. So as we went going into early August, we did not know if we were going to be able to do anything. And then the Illinois Department of Health and ISB and IHSA got together and allowed us to do some sports. The cross countries, golfs, girls tennis, girls swim and dive, sports where we could naturally distance and there was very little contact involved. They allowed us to do that. And so then we had to restructure all our schedules, which is fine. That's part of the job. So we restructured a lot of meetings with the conference ADs to restructure our schedules so we could play those games. Then a couple weeks later, they said, hey, we're going to allow contact days for every other sport. So at Linkway East, we have 29 sports. So now, not only are we scheduling the in-season fall sports, we're scheduling all the other sports, all the 22 other sports that we have, so they can have contact days, which were practices, obviously with heavy guidelines, but practices for all those other sports.
So I remember this with football. I want to ask, are you talking about sports that are traditionally not in the fall? We're giving contact days earlier?
All sports.
All sports,
so
everybody.
The traditional fall sports that aren't allowed to go right now are football, volleyball, and boys soccer. Them, along with all the other sports, we're allowed to have practice and contact days. That we go about 2 days a week. Started in the middle of. Started in September, goes through the end of October. So, so 2 days a week, every sport is having some sort of practice, in addition to the sports that are the new fall sports.
That are scheduled
Correct.
With competition. So then you have, that's kind of an interesting, I like the idea, keeping in touch with the kids. I would imagine the kids like being involved in some ways still. That's a good thing. Maybe this is a point, it's coming up here anyway, we're going to talk about the division of sports, like sports that are classified as low risk, like you mentioned, the ones that are going, like cross country, tennis, golf, was there another one I'm leaving out?
Girls swim and dive.
Girls swim and dive. So those are considered low risk, and they were allowed to proceed. Now, I know you have medium risk and high risk. I think football falls into a high risk category.
They're high risk except for 7-on-7. 7-on-7 is considered low risk, or medium risk.
Okay.
So there's a lot of rules to learn, Dave.
Yeah, it sounds like
every day is a new deal.
And you're keeping track of it for 29 sports.
I am, yeah.
So how was there 7-on-7 in the summer then? Did that happen?
There was
for
no
football.
No, because these rules came in place once we got into August, so we were done. So only 7-on-7 is going on as inter squad.
So kids can practice that way now.
Correct.
I got you.
But we can't compete against other schools like you would in the summer.
Right. Okay. I know I talked to you about this once before, and you mentioned it. So they're allowed contact. Basketball kids are practicing. Football kids are practicing. Does that? Are they wearing masks? Are they spacing? Are there group size limitations? What does that look like?
Yeah. So it depends on if they're indoors or outdoors. In the indoor sports, it's no more than 50 in a facility, and everyone has to be masked all the time, with the exception of our swimmers with getting in the water. That wouldn't be too healthy for them to have masks on. So if you're indoors in the weight room, in the field house, in the gymnastics gym, the main gym, you have to be masked all the time. For instance, for basketball, it's full throttle basketball, except they have to be masked.
They're all wearing masks.
If you go outside, the rules, if you're 6 feet apart and you're physically active, you can take your mask down, and that applies to the student athletes and the coaches. So that's every sport. If they're within 6 feet, they have to have the mask on. If they're physically active and 6 feet apart, they can take the mask off.
So does that mean, I'll use people who watch football on TV and people are blocking each other, tackling each other. Does that mean football kids are wearing masks if they're doing that type of drill work?
Anytime they're within 6 feet, they are. And in addition, in football, because they don't allow contact, you have to hit a bag. So,
Okay.
so they're not hitting each other.
Okay, so another way to create some space.
Another way to create space. And once again, they get in within that 6 feet, that mask has to be up.
Okay. So we've talked about just as a side thing, because I know some people don't necessarily realize or aren't aware of that, but there is like cheerleading, there's competitive dance, or like the pom-pom girls traditionally wear. They're usually involved in competitions too. Do they have competitions or practice? Or are they in the same boat all these other sports are?
They're in the same boat.
High risk or medium risk?
They're high risk.
Okay.
And so just because of the physical contact, the tumbling that goes on in those sports, I mean, they're the best athletes in the school.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of physical aspects to their sport that where there's touching and tumbling and that type of thing. So their season actually is supposed to start November 16th, and the IHSA broke it into 4 seasons: fall, winter, spring, and summer. They're a winter sport that's supposed to start November 16th, but right now with a lot of the guidelines for cheer and dance, we don't see how we can do it.
Yeah, okay. And then you said there's a summer season. I know in high school we think in terms of fall, winter, spring, but now we have a summer season. I'm assuming that's taking up some of the what would traditionally spring sport is now going to become a summer sport.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So, for instance, football, boys soccer, girls volleyball got moved to the spring. They're traditional fall sports. Most of the sports that are now in the summer are your traditional spring sports.
And are you scheduling those fall? So, like, does Lincoln Waste know what its or what its spring football schedule is?
We do, but there's a lot of, as I said, there's so much I don't know. Everything's fluid. So we do have a schedule set, but there's a lot of talk about adjusting the schedule. To be honest with you, we're still working on our winter schedule because we just haven't gotten guidelines from the IHSA on what it exactly looks like. So we put together the winter schedules, but we're waiting for guidelines. The IHSA has a meeting October 19th. Hopefully by October 20th we have a little bit more guidelines from them on, hey, under the current rules from the governor and from IDPH, this is what winter sports can look like. Well, they could do that on October 20th, and November 4th, the governor could change some rules, and then we're back to the drawing board. So it's just a lot of patience and flexibility, and just knowing that the situation is fluid.
It sounds like an incredibly difficult situation to deal with on so many levels. One more related to this, I want to move on to another topic, is what about, because I've heard back and forth on this too, state playoffs, state championships, cross country. Are they going to have a state championship, or swimming, or golf, or tennis?
So as of right now, no. Now we're in our fall seasons. Actually, we're getting close to the fall season. Girls and boys golf just wrapped up yesterday with their sectional. They're not going to have a state series. Next couple of weeks we're hosting a tennis sectional on Saturday. That'll wrap up the tennis season. And then cross country and swim and dive will have a sectional as well. But there'll be no state championship.
So you could be a sectional champ, but I'll give you a chance to answer. You don't know. I feel like that's where this question's going. Why did the state allow like a sectional playoff but not a state playoff?
I think because, I don't know. No, I think because of just the travel. When you have a state series, you have state championship, teams are coming from all over the state, schools are coming from all over the state, where sectional is more regional, sectional are more local, people in your COVID range, that type of thing. So I think that was the rationale.
Matter of fact, you mentioned that I was talking to a cross-country coach at Sandburg, and this issue came up, and I was surprised they were having an invite, but there were only 4 schools there because the 4 schools had to be within, I think, their county maybe, or whatever the designation was.
A COVID region.
COVID region.
Or conference.
So schools that they would normally compete against, they didn't get to see at this invite that they would normally participate in.
Correct.
And I imagine that's typical in all the sports then. I mean, swimming would have invites, tennis would have invites, golf would. travel.
Yeah. Yeah, we canceled basically every tournament this fall, and we're in the process right now of canceling all of our winter tournaments, which obviously for basketball and wrestling, the Christmas tournaments are big deals. And unfortunately, in 2020, hopefully 2021 will change, but in 2020 we can't do that.
So there is a possibility that even though the fall sports, traditional fall sports, aren't having a playoffs, there may be playoffs for other sports later on this year?
That's our goal. I mean,
Okay.
really.
But you don't know?
You're right. I don't know, but our goal is that we move forward, and just like everybody, we want to get to phase 5, and we want to make sure that we get society back to normal, but we also want to make sure we get high school athletics back to normal. But once again, some of that's out of our control.
Yeah, and I can't imagine. I really can't. It kind of gets to where I want to move into next. To me, this level of uncertainty or losing competitions or the chance to compete at the state level, how is this affecting morale, the spirit of the athletes and the coaches? And probably around the building. Going back to, not to sing off football, but yeah, Friday night football. I mean, that's a big deal in a high school building on campus, or tournaments. How are the kids reacting to it? Athletes, coaches, any way you feel you can address that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough. I mean, kids are resilient, right? And they learn to adjust. But also, they're in athletics to compete and to reach the highest level they can reach. And not having the state series, I think, has affected them. I do know some student athletes who are thinking about not coming out for a sport down the road if we don't have a state series. And club sports are really big, so some of them may just stick to club sports where they have a lot more freedom. But so yeah, it does affect kids. But I'll tell you, Lincoln Way's back to school 50%. So kids are coming to school every other day, and it just seems like they're a lot happier. Mm-hmm. And being allowed to have contact days for sports and in the in-season sports, I think that has helped morale. So I think once again, kids are resilient. They're disappointed, and I think there was a time where it was kind of dangerous for them to be stuck in their basement type of thing. But the IHSA has done a nice job of allowing us to have a little bit of time to work with them, and I think that's helped.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you're making too. The basement metaphor kind of thing, or or they're locked into their bedroom or wherever they're doing the remote learning from. Especially for athletes, that camaraderie, having teammates and the amount of time you spend bonding and being together, and then having that kind of yanked away from you has got to be really tough. So even though this isn't completely it, they're still having a chance to get some of those connections again. Yeah. How are the coaches doing?
They're a lot worse than the kids. Coaches are used to routine. They're creatures of habit. They're used to molding and changing kids' lives, and that's why they're into coaching. And then boom, that's gone. And they're competitive. Coaches are competitive. They want to play games and compete against other schools. So I think that's been tough. And really, the pressure lies on them to enforce the rules that the state is coming up with. And that's tough too, because obviously you want to go out and coach and mold kids and help them socially, emotionally. But now you're being, for lack of a better phrase, a COVID cop. Wearing the mask, make sure they're socially distanced away. They have to do symptom checks every single day, temperature checks every single day. They're doing a lot of things that they didn't sign up for coaching for. And so it's just, I spend a lot of time keeping their morale up too, and keeping them positive, keeping them focused on hopefully where we're headed, where we're going, and Lord willing, we'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, you brought up like coaches having a goal, being competitive by nature, and then when you don't get to compete in what those goals are, it seems, I'm not sure how you handle that, honestly.
It's tough. I mean, you try to keep perspective, They didn't march to Europe for, I guess you couldn't march to Europe. You didn't fly over to Europe for World War II. You're not in Vietnam. But for these kids, it does affect them. And this is where they're at in 2020. And they're social, emotional beings. And they need to be around other people. They need to be in front of teachers. They need to be with their coaches. So, in their world, this is tough. And once again, I just think coaches who got into coaching to be teachers and to mold kids, to have that pulled away was was tough. But like I said, I mean, you do have to keep things in perspective. We want to keep people healthy. We want to keep kids healthy and safe, and ultimately that's where we're at right now. And we try to keep that. As much as we're trying to push forward, we also have to trust the medical people and the governor to make the right decisions.
Right. There's one group we haven't talked about yet. I want to ask you about them. I don't know what kind of contact you've had. We've heard feedback in a variety of ways from parents who are, either upset that their kids aren't being allowed to compete, or, concerned about their seniors, their final year, or whether or not they're going to go on to college and play. And then I'm sure there are a lot of parents who are concerned about the health and well-being of their kids, and how you find that balance. Have you gotten feedback from parents? Have you heard how they're dealing with this and helping their son or daughter through this?
Sure, absolutely. School our size, we get all sorts of feedback. And the one thing I would say from the get-go is every parent wants the best for their kids. Every parent wants their kid healthy. So everyone has good intentions in mind, but perspectives may be different. I mean, there was one day where I got a phone call where they threatened to sue me that kids had to wear a mask. And on the same day, I got another phone call from a parent that said we weren't doing enough to protect kids. And so, and listen, I'm a parent too, so I'm empathetic and I'm trying to get in their shoes and understand their fears and concerns and all that. First of all, I didn't make up the rule. I have to enforce the rule, but so you can't sue me, So parents have their best intentions for their kids in mind. How they interpret things and how they feel are different, right? And some of it is they see these club teams and travel teams going full throttle. They see that you can cross the border and go into Indiana and there's no rules. And then they say, well, how come they're doing it across the border? How come the travel teams and club teams are doing it, but then at the schools you have all these rules? Once again, the school, they're upset at the schools, but we're not the ones making the rule. We have to enforce the rules and guidelines. So parents have the best intentions in mind. How they interpret it different, and it's my job to sift through that and try to ease parents to know that we're doing what we're supposed to do, what we're required to do, but that we're keeping the best interests of kids in mind, and that we're fighting for them. That if we feel it's safe to move forward and do some things, we're going to do it. And that, contact days for all these sports, I think it was because the athletic directors, let the state know that we can move forward and do this with some rules, but we can do it safely.
Still be done safely. It does sound like you're walking that line between, these two ends who are, like you said, I think that's a great way of describing it. They both have their son or daughter's best interests at heart. They want, the best for them. But, the application of that can look a little bit different.
It can, yep.
I'm going to want to ask you about the parent part, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. I remember in the spring last year, I was coaching a hurdler who was a very, very good hurdler, whose ambition was to compete at the state level. He wanted to compete in track in college. Any thoughts on how any of this is affecting the possibility for post-high school play, college, or scholarships even? Are you aware of that at all, or is there too many other things going on that's too hard to address right now?
Yeah, I'm definitely aware of it, and I think it does affect some seniors. It really does. I think about our spring sports seniors who needed that season, not only to compete and finish out their high school career, but also to get attention from colleges. And like your sprinter, or was it a hurdler? Yeah, your hurdler. I get it. I understand. I look at our football players in the fall. We have some kids I would say 2 or 3 MAC kids who have scholarships to MAC schools.
Right. MAC schools are what level, or what are some colleges in the
Northern
MAC
Illinois, Bowling Green, Miami of Ohio,
so Western Michigan. Big time football,
but they're also borderline Big Ten kids.
Oh, wow.
And not having a fall season, they're probably losing out on that opportunity to get a Big Ten scholarship. Now that's just an example. Maybe they wouldn't, but they are limiting their opportunities. At Linkway East, we have a lot of juniors who don't get on the fields for us, don't get on the courts because we're so successful athletically, and seniors usually are the ones who play. Well, they don't get that film for the college, so they can get recruited, and so I think it does affect them in that vein.
I wish the best for those athletes because especially kids who have that kind of goal, how important it is to be able to work towards that. I know I read in an article last week that there was an article in the Chicago Tribune that talked about basketball this year, what that might look like, based on the IHSA Sports Medicine Advisory Committee. Make sure I get all that right. Players are going to, have to wear masks. If that turns out to be the case, I mean, is it possible? You can say I don't know. Is it possible that we could see a basketball season where kids are actually wearing masks during competition?
Very much possible.
Wow.
Right now, during contact days, they're wearing masks and they're doing drills, they're scrimmaging, and I just know, talking to some of our kids, if that means they can have a high school season, they'll wear a mask. And it may be an empty gym. You may get a technical if you pull down your mask, but
Wow.
outside of a medical situation.
Right, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
But they are chomping at the bit to play for their high school, and they're willing to wear a mask. And personally, I go and watch all these teams practicing. They can do it. We can play basketball with masks on.
Even with the very explosive breathing that goes on, it's doable.
We have to adjust. Maybe there's an extra break in the, I don't know all the details. We got to wait till the IHSA says this is what it has to look like. But I will be an advocate for us playing basketball, even if we have to wear a mask and even if we have to do it in empty gyms.
And not to run through all 29 sports, but I'll use another one where the contact is incredibly close. What about a sport like wrestling? I mean, I imagine they would fall in the same category then, right? Maybe, but I would think with a mask.
I don't want to offend, because I know you're from Sandburg, which is the wrestling capital of Illinois. I don't want to offend anyone. Boy, I just don't know how we're going to wrestle in the winter. I know that there were some coaches who went down to the IHSA and proposed to move wrestling from the winter season to the summer season. Oh. I would be for that, to give them more of an opportunity. But under these guidelines right now, it just seems like it would be impossible to wrestle in the winter.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked about a lot of these. Let's turn to, how about you as a parent now? You can take off your athletic director cap, put on your parent cap.
Right.
I know you've got a daughter who's a sophomore. She does cheerleading.
Correct.
Right? You have a son who's a senior, the big senior we've just been talking about, plays football. So how about as a parent? How are your kids handling this? What are your conversations like with them as a parent to help them through this?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I will tell you, both of my children that are in high school right now thrive when they're in the classroom. They thrive when they're in sports with their coaches driving them. And so, I'm an advocate of getting these kids back to class safely. It's been tough. Once again, just like most kids, there's social, emotional issues that you have to worry about with your children. And both of them are very social beings and love being around other people. And so that's been tough. Also, they're both students who do a lot better academically when they're face-to-face with a teacher. And I don't think that's uncommon for most kids, but I know as a father, and you asked me put on my parent cap, those are my concerns. I understand we got to be safe, but I also think the quicker we can get these kids back in the classroom full-time and back playing sports, the better they're going to be. And I'm very grateful that my daughter can go to cheerleading practice. They practice 3 days a week, and then football practice is 2 days a week with masks on. But it's good for them. It's good for them. So I'm grateful that they have that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, my hat's off to you as parents, also as an AD. And I agree. What kids are going through now is like a lifetime event. I hope this is a one-time lifetime event.
You and me both, yeah.
And I hope they do get to compete real soon here. Just a couple last in closing type questions for you. What do you miss most about the fall the way it is now, compared to what it was last year, the year before?
Sure. Well, you mentioned it, the Friday night lights. I mean, that's a big deal in Frankfort, and the energy at those football games, especially those big games. I miss those. I mean, big conference match in soccer. Our girls volleyball team is very, very competitive, and obviously the Southland and girls volleyball is really strong. So just the energy when there's a big match, and when you walk in that gym. I think those are the things as an AD you miss. And you know, I didn't become an AD to sit behind a computer and trace, you know, COVID exposure cases. You know, I became an AD so I could run those big events and be part of that culture. And so that's probably what I missed the most.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting thing. I'd like to even bring it back to Chicago Christian. When I've been coaching at Sandburg, and then I was, you know, a few years with you at Chicago Christian. So we both have had the big school, small school experience. The energy level at Chicago Christian, a school much smaller, you know, by several thousand or a few thousand, the energy level was still incredibly high. Friday nights, the lights were going, the band was playing, the bleachers were packed. On a smaller scale, it still had that you know, enthusiasm, that spirit. To me, it was magic still. You know, and it's hard for me to picture schools without that kind of energy around the, you know.
Well, it's the start of the school year. It builds
Right.
enthusiasm for the entire school year, and something to have pride in, something to gather on a Friday night.
Right.
And I think that's whether it's at Chicago Christian, Sandburg High School, Lincoln Way East. It's a big part of the culture.
Yeah, small towns all over the state.
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
no doubt.
We've talked about going to see a game out in Wilmington, you know, or Coal City, or I won't say Hampshire. I just said it. It's a bad game. We're not gonna talk about that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about, can you share, is there anything that you've learned from these conditions that, you know, will help you be a better AD or help coaches be better coaches? Anything that's come out of this that's a positive in going forward?
Well, you know, from a professional standpoint, I mean, I've been able to spend a lot more time with the cross countries, the golfs, tennis, swimming. You know, I've learned more about cross country this year than I probably did the previous 8 years. We always had something rolling on campus, so I couldn't get off campus to go watch cross country. So, you know, I've really grown to appreciate those sports more and be able to spend a little bit more energy just watching those kids, encouraging those kids, and just the excitement of being able to go out there and compete. I think that's been a positive. You know, I also say is, man, I'm going to be much more appreciative when we get back to normal. You know, I'm going to appreciate those Friday nights, those volleyball matches, soccer matches. You know, just being able to do the job as an athletic director that I signed up for. You know, appreciate what we do have. I mean, I think as a society, I think we spent a lot more time with our families during this pandemic.
Yeah, we did.
And I think that's something to be thankful for as well. You know, I had my daughter home from Alabama, and we had more family meals and spent more time just talking and playing games, doing puzzles and whatnot. And so I guess it taught me to slow down a little bit. I don't know how long that lasts, but you know, slow down and just appreciate life, appreciate people. So I guess you know, there's not too much positive here, but if those would be a couple positives.
Yeah, and those are, I think, I think that's a great way to look at that. That if you know, we'll get through this, we'll get to another side of this at some point, and at that point, Friday nights will be appreciated that much more.
Sure.
You know, the basketball game in the gym would be appreciated that much more. For any athlete to be able to compete and practice and train for an event will be that much more appreciated or special to them at that point. I think that's a really powerful lesson to learn. And like you, yeah, I'm sure other families around the state are doing more family time, without question.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, it's just fun to sit out at door 31 at Linkway East and greet the kids as they come in. I mean, we went so long where the building was empty. It's awesome to see kids coming back, and it seems like they're more excited, enthusiastic when they come to school. So that's another thing that I guess we'll be grateful for.
Kids want to go to school.
They do, absolutely.
It's great. Do you have any other last thoughts you want to share with us? I think that's a nice place to wrap up, but I don't want to cut you off if you got something else.
No. I think once again, I mean, appreciate what we got and learn lessons from it. I mean, every day is a new adventure. Every day, we just got new rules last night from the Illinois Department of Health, and so it's something that we got to fight through and keep moving forward and appreciate life as we know it. So.
Well, it sounds like, you know, between the athletes and the coaches, teachers, and, you know, athletic directors, administrators, it sounds like you guys are doing an amazing, to me, you know, it looks like you're doing an amazing job navigating incredibly difficult waters. You know, I think a lot of uncertainty that, you know, creates just all kinds of struggle to deal with, overcome. So I'm really impressed. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
I want to wish you and the athletes the best, and the parents, the community. I hope the coaches. I hope you guys get through this, you know, strong, and you have things to look forward to down the road real soon.
You bet.
I'm Dave Wurzel. Thank you for watching Spotlight Issues High School Sports 2020 during the pandemic. Thank you.